How to paint a sparkling ocean using oil paints. You only need 4 colours for this tutorial, so we have burnt umber, ultramarine blue, indigo blue and titanium white. You'll need some brushes, so it's important to have a fine detail brush and a fluffy brush. Yes, this is a makeup brush. Also a palette knife to mix your colours and an oil painting medium, so I use Gal Kid, but you can substitute this for linseed oil, and something to wash your brushes with after, so I have Zest It, but you can use turpentine, and also a rag or paper towel to wipe your brush off on. First we're mixing grey for the sky using ultramarine blue, titanium white and burnt umber. Then we're mixing white with this to create a few lighter shades so we can make a gradient. And then for the sea we're mixing all 4 colours together but making it mainly indigo blue. Here's my palette, you can screenshot it and just try and mix your colours as closely to match this as possible. I always add my medium onto the palette so I can dip my brush in it before dipping it into the oil paint. And first we're going straight in and making our horizon line. This is going to be very blended out so it doesn't have to be that straight. And basically what we're doing is creating a gradient from the darkest to lightest, and we want the lighter shade to be the majority of the sky. And in between each shade I'm wiping off my brush to make sure they don't all get mixed together. Then we're going in with our fluffy brush and we're blending this all out, once again wiping off the fluffy brush in between every few strokes, which also helps to make sure there's not too much paint on it and it stays fluffy. Then you want to take your fine detail brush and we're just starting to paint some very faint sparkles. They're essentially just tiny little circles that are lightly filled in. Then we're taking the lightest grey that we mixed and we're adding some more, so you should have something that looks like this. And lastly for the sparkles we're just going in with pure white and we're adding some more bold ones. You want to make sure that some of them overlap in different ways, and also in the parts where they overlap make sure that you're making this brighter. And at this point you should have something that looks like this. Now we're going to fill in the sea. The reason that I like to do the sky first is so that you can lean on the canvas whilst you're painting the small sparkles, but now we're blocking in big shapes for the ocean. And once again this can be quite rough because we're going to do a lot of blending in a minute. So we're filling in the big shapes just with a block colour, which is the darkest blue that we mixed, and then we're going in with a lighter blue in between them to fill it in. And the further away we are, we want it to be slightly lighter than the foreground. Also we want to keep in mind that all the waves in the distance will be smaller and also flatter than the ones in the foreground. And once again we are just blending this all out. Now I'm taking a medium blue and I'm just going to add some details to the foreground wave. This can just be very rough because we will blend that out in a bit. And then we are also taking a slightly darker blue and adding some more detail. You just sort of want to add some very rough short lines which kind of follow the direction of the larger waves. And then in the background, this is what I mean by the furthest away ones are going to be flatter the closer that they get to the horizon line. And then this middle wave is going to be more in focus than the foreground or the background, so I'm just going in, defining it a little bit more, and then we're starting on the sparkles which are coming closer to the foreground. These sparkles are getting smaller the closer that they are to the wave which is most in focus, and then on the wave which is most in focus we are adding some very tiny white dots. So I'm using just pure white for all of this, and then we blend it out very lightly. I cannot stress how light you need to be pressing on your blending brush. And then we are going back in with pure white and just making this slightly more defined before moving on to the very out of focus sparkles in the foreground. You can just make these really rough because, as you'll see in a second, we're just blending it out, and once again we are applying barely any pressure to that blending brush. And for our very last step we're taking a medium blue, or you can use a grey, and adding some tiny birds into the background. And there you have it, this is the finished piece. Most of the materials will be linked in my bio. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and also please send me pictures of what you create from this video. I would really love to see.